So I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but apparently Chris Cuomo interviewed Tucker Carlson. I know that's probably an odd pair for you, right? Because you have Tucker Carlson, who was, on the right, and you have Chris Cuomo, on the liberal side. And it was often that they would actually smear each other, I guess. Like when Chris Cuomo still worked at CNN and Tucker Carlson was a part of Fox News, they were combative against each other, obviously. But the point that Chris Cuomo said for this conversation is that there's too much, anger among the people, and that people should sit down and be willing to talk to people that they disagree with. So apparently, after Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News, Chris Cuomo actually said in this interview that he reached out to Tucker Carlson after that happened. It's almost like, I'm not sure if they signed any type of NDAs when they were at CNN or when he was at Fox News. But it does kind of seem like once they were fired from those positions, it's almost like a door opened up, so to speak, where they felt like they could talk about some things that they couldn't discuss while they were still a part of those networks. There's 3 different points that I do want to touch on from this interview. The first part is, yes, of course, the issue with Andrew Cuomo and how Chris Cuomo decided to handle that situation. And I think you might be interested in Tucker Carlson's response to this. I was not expecting this response. Let's go ahead and get into this part here.
Media enforces. We are not supposed to be doing this. I am doing something bad right now, not just wrong. This is bad.
Morally bad.
I am giving a platform. That's the new word for censoring, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm giving Tucker Carlson a platform. I'm talking to him about who he is and what he's about and why he does what he does. Why? He's bad. And that's the end of the analysis. But look where it's gotten us. Nobody talks to each other anymore. You've got politicians resigning because they say, yeah, it turns out nobody really wants us to do anything here but fight, and I've kind of had enough. I'm going to go. I mean, whoever thought we would see any of this, and yet nobody's trying to remedy it.
I think it's really hard. And the one way in which I really sympathize with you, and I said this in public at the time, is that you were attacked, and I don't know the details, I'm not going to ask you to reveal them, but felt like you were fired because you remained close to your brother, who was governor of New York, and he was going through a bunch of stuff. He left office, and you were still talking to him, and you weren't allowed to. And my take on
Let me pause here. Let me fill in what they're leaving out because they're trying to tiptoe around this. I don't know why, but long story short, he wasn't just fired because he disclosed information with his brother, Andrew Cuomo, who at that point in time was under investigation for sexual harassment, right? He was also fired. Actually, he was suspended, and then he was fired after Chris Cuomo himself also had a sexual harassment allegation from a former coworker. So there were 2 things that were happening here. It wasn't just because he, basically went against journalistic integrity and he revealed leaked information to his brother, right? It was also because he had the sexual harassment allegation himself. So both Andrew Cuomo and Chris Cuomo had sexual harassment allegations against them at that point in time. I got to fill that in because Tucker's leaving that out.
On it from a distance, knowing neither you nor your brother, was you got to stick with your brother. It's your brother. And that obligation supersedes all others because that's your family. That's like a moral obligation. If my brother committed triple murder, I'd be against triple murder, but I would never abandon my brother because he's my brother. And so anybody who says your obligation to me overrides your obligation to your own brother, that person's evil. That's how I feel.
No. So there's a different, this is something I wanted to say here when I saw this interview. And this interview is very long. There's 2 parts to it, by the way. There's a difference between abandoning a family member and having journalistic integrity. Just because you choose not to reveal or leak information to your brother, which is a part of being a journalist, that doesn't mean that you're abandoning them. You could still be there and support. He could have still been in there and supported Andrew Cuomo, which, by the way, I don't believe Andrew Cuomo was innocent any damn way. But you could have sat there and supported Andrew Cuomo as his brother without leaking information to him that you had that was not supposed to be revealed as a journalist. You could have done both at the same time and still kept your job, at least with that part. Can't speak for the sexual harassment part.
Feel about it. And I felt like they were doing that to you. That was just my perspective from watching.
People feel differently about family, which was somewhat of a new concept for me.
In what way?
I had a big shot media person say to me in an interview on their platform, I would not have helped my brother. Not if it would have conflicted with my ethical obligations as a journalist.
Or your career ambitions is what they're really saying.
Well,
it's disgusting.
Either way. And I said, well, first of all, it didn't, because I didn't cover my brother's situation on my show. I've never had the audience give me a hard time until they started hearing things in the media that didn't square with what they had thought. But look,
but can I say, whoever said, I don't know who you're talking about, it could have been any of them because they all have the same view, but they're the moral criminals as far as I'm concerned. If someone is going to say, I would sell out my brother because my boss wanted me to, what do you listen to yourself?
No, it's not selling out your brother. It's just like as a journalist, you're not supposed to reveal your source, right? So it's like if someone came to you and you're a journalist and they said, what's your source on the story? Like they did towards Matt Taibbi. Remember that? Like, obviously, you're not supposed to give up your source. That's just a part of being a journalist. And that's a part of journalistic ethics as well. So to me, it's just like, no, what Chris Cuomo did was wrong. What Andrew Cuomo did was wrong. It's not even just about the sexual harassment allegations against Andrew Cuomo. There was also the nursing home deaths that he was also responsible for this as well. So there's multiple things that were against Andrew Cuomo. I'm sorry. When I was listening to this conversation, I was like, I know he is your brother, but wrong is wrong, son. Wrong is wrong. And Andrew Cuomo was wrong.
Like, that's the ultimate betrayal.
Look, people can have their own ethics, their own morals, their own standards.
Well, I'm going to judge the crap out of them for
Knock
that.
yourself out. For me, it was more, I got myself into a situation I didn't see coming. And I thought, and my therapist laughs when I say this. He lived with me all through this. He's been like a life coach to me for a really long time. Great guy in my life. I never say his name because he'll lose all his other patients if anybody knows that he's working with me. But he was like, what do you mean you didn't see this coming? The media was all over your brother. They wanted him to go down. They wanted you to go down. They hated what was happening during the pandemic with you having him on the show and all the admiration you guys were getting. This is a jealous business. And I hear that. I understand it, but I don't want to accept it. And
Hold up. So this is the part that was really weird to me. So now it's because people were jealous of Chris Cuomo? Like, come on, man. You can't make this stuff up. Your brother, Andrew Cuomo, at that point in time, did behave inappropriately. If he did not, he would not have apologized. Don't you guys remember the statement from him? Not the first one, but the second one, when he issued an apology for behaving inappropriately to those women in his office. So what are we talking about here? This is not about no jealousy, okay? It's not like CNN was the only network at that point in time. People was not trying to come for you, boo. They weren't trying to get your job like that. You went against what you were supposed to do as a journalist, and you leaked that information, and that is messed up. That is a problem. Yes, that is a problem. And anyone who is a journalist should call that out.
And what I have decided was, look, I didn't have any control over how getting fired happened. All I control is what I do next. And I tried to get myself into that place, and that's what made me call you, is that was so hard. It was so hard for me to see all this stuff that I had worked so hard on and I had valued so greatly just vanish. And well, now what am I? And now what do I do? And now is it over for me? Like,
this is what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about when Ben Shapiro said your job is your purpose. If you don't have your job, you don't have a purpose. This is another example of that. Listen to what he just said. Is it over for me? What do I do now? Right? So it sounded like to me, Chris Cuomo was kind of seeing as his job as being part of his purpose. That is a dangerous mindset and a dangerous thing to have, right? You can always go get another job, which you did, Chris. You hopped right on over to News Nation just like that. All of a sudden, nobody was like, hey, this guy had these sexual harassment charges. Hey, this guy leaked information as a journalist. Nope, they let you right in. They opened the door and let your ass come right in there. Wouldn't have done that for other people, though.
Is that it? I'll never be number one on a huge platform again. So what am I about? What do I do? Of course, like you, I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my family. I love the family that I choose, my people. I'm there for them. I'm a great friend in crisis.
You hear this? What am I about and what do I do? This is a problem, folks.
Great. I'm not great when things are good, but I'm a great friend in crisis. And I had to really think about things I'd never thought about again before. And I wanted to check in with you about that to see how you were negotiating that space, because it had been so painful. But when I met you, and we should talk about this. You were not the way I was. You were ebullient. You were laughing. And you were, let me tell you, it was a favor to me. And this is going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. This is a weird world. And now I know things I didn't know before.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a real blessing for you. What did you figure out that you didn't know before?
Well, I would just say, I loved working there. I was there 14 years. They were always nice to me. They never told me what to say. So it's not an attack on them to say that I was hemmed in by the fact that I work for someone else. And that's just.
Let me pause there for a second. I wanted you to hear that part because I thought that was important, because I noticed more people now that Tucker Carlson has started his own network. I noticed more people now are saying, wow, Tucker Carlson gets to say whatever he wants now. Did you hear what he just said? He said at Fox, when he was at Fox, they never told him what to say. So the words that you heard from Tucker Carlson, that was how he felt at that point in time. I hope that is clear to everyone now, because a number of people have said that, but he's telling you they never told him. So hold on to that, okay? They never told him. Yes, thank you, Matt. They never told him what not to say. Let's go on a little bit more and then we'll go to the second
nature of the relationship. No matter how free you think you are, part of you is assessing like, whoa, I actually am an employee. I do have a boss. And I knew that they disagreed with me on a bunch of big topics. And to their great credit, they never tried to change my view on those topics. And I would say that now, even though I'm not there anymore. Good for them. But you aren't fully free if you work for someone else. Like, that's how I felt about it. And I just had reached this time in my life where I feel like there's all these really important things going on. I want to be as honest as I can possibly be at all times. And that was a hindrance to me. So I also had this kind of supernatural sense that everything's gonna be fine. And that in the end, you die anyway. So what are you afraid of exactly?
It's a good point. I Am Lux said, was he self-policing? That's what it sounds like was probably happening there. I mean, there were a number of things that Tucker Carlson has said on Fox News during that point in time that I heavily disagreed with, and that I did think were problematic, So, but what I wanted you to hear is that, that's what he just said. He said that he had the freedom to do those things.
And I'd also done it for too long, too long, same gig. It's good to be, and I have been fired before a couple of times. So it's good to be fired because it brings you low and you don't become the overbearing asshole that every TV person is on some level. I mean, I already am that, but kept it in check a little bit. A little public humiliation is really important for a man. I would recommend it to all men. And so I was very happy from day one, but it was maybe a different time in my life or something. I was ready for it.
Everybody.
Okay. Like I said, this is a very long interview, so I'm going to certain parts. And then here is the second part here. What did I want to do? Oh, yeah. We'll do the Russia part last. Okay, here's the second part here. And this is the part where they talk about race and equality. Hold on to your popcorn for this one because it's going to get bumpy, guys.
Immigration, the migration stuff. you are hit with the stick of you are forwarding the replacement theory, that the Democrats want to bring in as many brown people as possible to replace white people.
Well, they've said that repeated. Well, like 3 books have been written on it. I've
played 3 books. That's not the policy is not to replace white people with brown people.
I've never said white people. I said the current people who are born here, many of whom are not white. I don't know how we get to white people, though.
Pause. This is the question I wanted to ask you guys. So Tucker Carlson is telling you he never said not white. He never said white people. Is that what you guys remember? Tell me in the chat. Because he's telling, Chris Cuomo said, you're talking about immigration and you're saying the Democrat wants to bring brown people in to replace white people. And Tucker Carlson just told you in this interview, he just said he never said white people. Is that what you guys remember? Let me know in the chat. We'll continue on.
So the attacks on white people are one of the biggest things that's ever happened in our country. The fact that people in the media can just sort of blithely attack an entire group on the basis of their skin color. And I think attacking people on the basis of their skin color is always wrong. It was every bit as wrong as what's happening now. It's affirmative action, totally immoral. How can you give someone a job on the basis of a skin color? How can you deny?
Let me pause. Because see, I see the comments coming in through the chat. Dwayne said he is lying. Katrina said he said white people. Yeah, Gilbert said dog whistles. That's what I remember. Christian said, I don't remember his statements. Peter says he means white people. He knows he's a racist. He just got caught. See, Chris said lying ass. Yeah. So this is exactly what I thought as well, guys. Like when I watched this interview, I was like, no. I think I remember you saying white people. I'm pretty sure that's what I remember you saying. And what's interesting is that Chris Cuomo doesn't really push back too hard on that. Again, you get this interview with Tucker Carlson. Obviously, you're not going to be too critical of him, right? That's how you get that interview with someone like him if you are a part of the Democratic Party, or especially those two who have gone at each other for years. But I thought I remembered that too. Now listen to this part here about the jobs.
Blithely attack an entire group on the basis of their skin color. And I think attacking people on the basis of their skin color is always wrong. It was every bit as wrong as what's happening now. It's affirmative action, totally immoral. How can you give someone a job on the basis of a skin color? How can you deny someone a job on the basis of a skin color?
Pause. Let me call out the affirmative action thing. Because see, this is what people like Tucker Carlson and a lot of times conservatives get wrong about affirmative action. Affirmative action does not actually benefit Black people the most. It doesn't benefit Latino people the most. It doesn't benefit Asian people the most. You know who benefits the most from affirmative action? White women. So you see, a lot of people, they like to make that talking point and they haven't looked at the data, especially when it comes to employment. You see, when affirmative action was spread open enough to also include women, that opened the door for affirmative action to actually benefit white women more. It doesn't benefit Black people more. So that talking point needs to go away. I'm actually surprised. I'm saying this. Chris Cuomo's the one hosting the interview. If Chris Cuomo knew this information and had this data, he should have pushed back on that. He does not push back on it because I'm assuming Chris Cuomo just does not know the data, or he does know and he don't want to go too hard at Tucker. I'm going to assume he doesn't know. 2, the other thing that he said, you shouldn't hire someone just solely based on their race. There is this thing called an applicant tracking system. The applicant tracking system picks up the qualifications for the job. So whatever you put on the resume that closely matches the job description, that's what it picks up, those keywords. It shoots out those applications to the HR hiring manager. They look at the ones that were selected. They pick from that batch. Now, that is not to say that they may not say, okay, we have 3 white people. We have 1 Black applicant. We only want to interview 3. So let me put this person to the side and put the Black applicant in. So we actually interview a Black person as well. But the point is, you have to meet the qualifications. You don't become a doctor just because you were Black. You have to go through med school. You don't become a lawyer just because you were black. You got to pass the bar. You don't become a pilot without earning a damn pilot license. And this is another talking point that has been parroted by people like Tucker Carlson and people on the right. Not everybody, because not everybody on the right believes this. That is just false. And for those of us that have worked in those institutions and those of us who are familiar with the applicant tracking system, we know how this works. So that is false. We're
not allowed to do that in our country. That's what I was taught growing up in a very liberal place in California. And then I get older and it's like, oh, we're definitely gonna do that. And you can't complain about it or you're the racist. And it's like, no. You're the one punishing people for how they were born, for their skin color. Not only do we do that, but you can't mention it.
Well, if Tucker Carlson can realize that people have been punished for how they were born because of their skin color, then why is it during the police protest, during the Black Lives Matter protest, you couldn't realize that the police officers were doing the same damn thing towards black people? Okay. So, this is a very eye-opening moment. I'm not trying to come up here and expose everybody, but it is what it is. I'm trying to show you how people use certain issues to elevate their self and elevate their platform. And what kills me is Chris Cuomo sitting here and is just like, let's be bros, let's be pals, let's be buds.
I think I can, actually. And boy, I've had a lot of people, Republicans, tell me I can't mention that. Why? Well, they never explain. Just shut up.
It makes them radioactive.
I don't care. That's wrong.
Because it is substituting a level playing field where there isn't one. So the way affirmative action was supposed to work was that it would enable a merit-based system that people who are minorities were being kept out of for two reasons. One, they didn't have the opportunities early on to build up the tools that a lot of white people did because of what they call now privilege, but really it's opportunity. And the second reason is that because white people were the majority and didn't like the minority.
Okay, so
let me make this more clear than the way that Chris did, because they were racist, okay? Because they were racist. You can say that, Chris. Just make it clear as day. They were racist. They didn't want to hire black people. They didn't want to work with black people. And as I got older, I saw this happen to other groups in this country. I remember when I was in college, I watched this happen. I watched people make these comments about people that were Mexican, people who were Puerto Rican. And what was weird is they would make these comments in front of me as if I'm supposed to nod and agree with them. And as if I don't realize what they're saying. And if they're saying that about them, what are they saying about me? It's because they were racist, Chris. Okay.
So you had a system that was set up against them, had to be remedied. That was the theory.
It's almost impossible to apply logic to this because it's based on obviously racial hostility and political calculation. It's not based on any principle of justice.
So again, this was a moment when Chris Cuomo could have pushed back on Tucker Carlson and let him know, did you realize the data shows that white women actually benefit from affirmative action the most? But again, he don't know.
But I'll just
hold on. That is justice. Fairness under law, meaning that just because this person is brown doesn't mean you can treat him like a dog.
Oh my gosh, of course not.
But that's what it was supposed to remedy.
Just because this person is any color, you should never punish someone for how he was born.
But the country did.
Of course, and that ended in 1965.
No, it did not. See, what Tucker Carlson does, let me tell you how this game works. He'll be kind of good on some issues, right? He'll push back against censorship. He'll push back against, giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, those kind of things, right? But to keep the base that he has when it comes to racial issues, he still tries to find a way to make it seem like systemic racism is not a problem. So instead of saying no, people should not be racist towards these minority groups. He says, well, no one should be judged based on their skin color. You see how that works? Because that means he doesn't have to really sit there and acknowledge the problem. That's what Tucker Carlson does. So he's able to pull a part of a new audience by saying, we shouldn't give this money to Ukraine, and I support free speech and people shouldn't be censored. So he might pull over a couple, people that are independent minded, people who are not politically involved at all, whatever, pull over a new base of audience, but still maintain that right base that he has by still being weak on the racial issues. Candace does the same thing. I just talked about this with Candace. Oh, she does the same thing. That's how he keeps that base. So for Tucker Carlson to say, yes, that ended in 1965. No, it did not end in 1965. Systemic racism is still a problem in this country. You guys have to remember there were riots in Boston in the 1980s over integrating schools. In the 1980s, after school integration was actually passed, it's not like all these schools were integrated that same year. That's not how that worked. You still had redlining. You had housing segregation. You have real estate discrimination. You have educational discrimination. And then depending on what neighborhood you live in and what the property taxes are in that area, that determines whether or not you're going to have a school to attend that's actually properly funded. Who's usually in those neighborhoods with those underfunded and under-resourced schools? Tucker. It did not end. The criminal justice system. We see this over and over again, where you can have a black man and a white man, same record. The black guy automatically will get more time. Tucker Carlson knows this. He's not stupid. And what is interesting to me is that he can sit there and ride around in the car with Ice Cube, and Ice Cube can take him through his neighborhood in Compton, and Ice Cube can tell him this is how the neighborhood has still not changed. Nothing has improved. The politicians ain't helped none of the people in the community. And he can show you all of this. And he can show you a whole neighborhood of black people living in poverty and despair after all these years and nothing has changed. And you can sit there and talk with Ice Cube for hours and ride along in the car with him and bounce to the freaking music. And you still think that all that ended after 1965. That's a damn lie. And that's the grift.
Oh, it didn't.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a couple questions then. If whites become the minority, which I keep reading is going to happen really soon, should they be beneficiaries of affirmative action?
If they start to get discriminated against?
Well, they're already discriminated.
So again, this is a failure of Chris Cuomo. When Tucker Carlson says, if white people become the minority, should they benefit from affirmative action? White women already benefit from affirmative action, Tucker. Chris Cuomo, this is embarrassing. This is seriously embarrassing. How do you not know this? All these years you've been on CNN and you can't get this right?
Against in college admissions, in hiring, both federal and private sector. Whites are, I just saw this the other day, I was kind of shocked by it. If you're to break out the country by ethnicity, which I hate, I don't think we should count by race. I think we should address people as they were created by God, which is as individuals.
That's fine.
Here we go again. Race and ethnicity is not the same thing.
Fine, as long as everybody's getting a fair shake. How do you enable equality? If it's not going to happen naturally,
okay,
how do you enable it?
If you could find a way that wouldn't let some people sit in the front row and others sit in the balcony, or give some people, a water fountain in the lobby and some a water fountain in the utility closet, then we could talk about it. But no scheme devised, or that conceivably could be devised, doesn't wind up helping some people on the basis of their skin color and hurting people on the basis of their skin color.
How is it that the people in charge are mostly white, but they hate whites?
Well, that's a very deep question. And I would say this, I don't know the answer.
Yes, you do. And Chris knows the answer as well. They know damn well why it works that way, because of systemic racism, because the people who are minorities, we are not in positions of power. Black people, listen up. I'm gonna make something very clear here. We are not in positions of power. We don't own anything. Do people realize this? We don't own anything. And don't come to me and say, well, Oprah and LeBron, Beyonce and Jay-Z, those people are outliers. As a community, we don't own anything. Even some of the black businesses, the small black businesses, we don't own the building or we don't own the damn land. As a community, we don't own anything. The people who have the power are the people in the majority and the people who own shit. So Tucker, if you guys can sit here and understand that Israel is in power, they own the land, the air, and the sea. They control all of that, and they oppress the Palestinian people. That's the same way that you can understand who's in power in this damn country. But as a community, we don't own anything. That ended. That ended when Black Wall Streets were burned to the ground. So for both of them to sit here and be like, I don't know, I don't do things, I don't know. You know.
But I would say this just as I travel, to the extent that I do, I have never one time been yelled at by a non-white person, not one time, not one time. No black person has ever yelled, racist! I've had way more, never. It's been about 99% 32-year-old female white lawyers. I'm just saying.
Do you hear that? That's because.
What do they say? Racist!
Hey, thank you for.
That's because, Tucker, it's usually not black people doing that. It's usually not black people saying those things. That's why. The last piece here is about his interview with Vladimir Putin. But Chris Cuomo, you got to do better. You really have to do better. Like, I don't know, man. Like, that was weak and that was wiggity whack. Learn your history. Please study the history about affirmative action. You have to do better. This part here about the Putin interview is important.
So I don't go into things like I just talked to Putin and everyone's like, you got to be rough on Putin. Actually, you're not my boss. I can do whatever I want. Yeah, I could go in there and tell Putin, you're a monster. Okay, what do we get out of that? So I can like prove that I'm a tough guy? I don't need to prove that. I'm not insecure about that. I'm tough enough anyway. So that, I just don't have a chip on my shoulder at all about any of that. I just don't care. I've got nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and I just want to hear people talk because I think it's interesting. I think it's important to hear people talk. And so I can kind of pull myself out of it more than I was able to before. If you're 31 and trying to make it in TV, you're itching for a confrontation to show your skills. I can win. And now it's like, nah, I've done that. I'm not interested in that. It's totally pointless. I don't elicit any interesting information. It's all about me and my performance. And I know you know what I'm talking about because you've lived the life, but there's a lot of pressure on you to make a moment. And now I'm just like, I've had a lot of moments. You can look them on YouTube if you want.
So do you feel that when you look at how you used to do it versus how you're doing it now, was it a function of this will work? How much of it was this is how I feel, and how much of it was this will be funny, or this will resonate, this will land, this will get clicks or likes? No,
it's not that. No, I mean, I've always been
convicted,
an instinct player, 100%. And the only times I've gone really wrong, as with the Iraq War, was when I suppressed my instincts and joined a herd. That was really the last time, 2002, that I did that.
Now, somebody gives you that answer, the follow-up is, what do you mean? You're a big boy, you're a smart guy.
I'm sorry, that's the wrong video. Sorry, guys, that's my bad. Welcome to my world. Here is the Putin one. Sorry, that interview was so long. I was just like, Jesus, because it's two parts. There's two parts to that interview. I'm not kidding. Like, not at all.
Okay, why you interview? And it's a different vibe. Tucker. I mean, look, if we had been in more contact before you did the Putin interview, I would have told you, you got to check some boxes with this guy. I get why you're going to say, I'm not going to get there and get into a fight with a guy who made
Sorry, let me start over. Okay. He talks about the Putin interview.
a lot of your stuff for this. And it's a different vibe, Tucker. I mean, look, if we had been in more contact before you did the Putin interview, I would have told you, you got to check some boxes with this guy. I get why you're going to say, I'm not going to get there and get into a fight with a guy who may not let me out of the country.
No. I was never afraid. I was afraid of the U.S. government, not of Putin at all.
Of them doing what?
Arresting me when I got back for a sanctions violation. That's what my lawyers told me. If you go talk to Putin, and if you don't ask him tough questions, the Biden administration very easily arrests you. There's a big law firm told me that, a big law firm, one of the biggest law firms.
But how?
So did you guys hear that? I thought you guys would be interested in hearing that if he didn't, I guess, push back on Vladimir Putin, that the U.S. government would try to sanction him from that interview.
Bullshit is that?
I thought it was, and I was like, I don't care. I'm an American citizen. I'm going anyway.
I don't disagree that sitting across from Putin and getting into a shouting match or whatever is going to bear much fruit for people. I understand that. And I get that it's a commodity in the media, but I get that it may not be the highest good.
Well, it's also just vanity. It's vanity.
There is an aspect of it. But you made choices. Like, you didn't ask him about Navalny. You said, well, all killers, all leaders kill. But don't you feel that if you are going to go and sit with someone like that, you have to hold them to account for things that matter? Like
I did.
The fact that he may have murdered somebody or a lot of people?
Well, I mean, the Ukrainians say that he didn't kill Navalny. So I think it's,
who killed him then? Guy looks good 1 minute and the next minute he's dead?
I mean, in some larger sense, the Russian government...
And what Ukrainians say they don't. Zelensky says he killed him.
Seriously, Chris, have you ever heard of an organization called the C, the I, and the A? Like, unless you, again, I think he's just being intentionally clueless.
No, he doesn't. No, the Ukrainian government said, no, he died of natural causes. Now, what is actually going on there? I can't even guess, okay? Navalny died in the middle of the Munich Security Conference, also in the middle of the debate over Ukraine funding in the United States, and his death was within hours used by the President of the United States to justify another $60 billion. So those are just facts. I haven't the faintest idea. Putin put him in prison, okay? So there's that. So in some
poisoned
sense,
him.
He's responsible. Look, here's what I learned, and I'm hardly a Russia expert, is this is an extremely complicated political environment, extremely, like next level, okay? These are the people who dominate world chess. And so their politics are incomprehensible to me. So what's actually happening, and I mean, I've been in a lot of countries and covered a lot of stuff abroad. And the one thing I've learned is you actually don't really know what's going on. And so I had a bunch of Navalny questions to answer your question in my 4,700 questions that I'd written out. And I decided on the fly not to ask it because I felt like, what about Navalny? Well, whatever he's going to say, I'm not going to move the ball at all. There's a war going on that is resetting the world. I'm not for throwing your political opponents in prison. I hate it. I'm mad that the Biden administration is now doing it. I'm worried about it happening to me. I mean, honestly, I want to get that on the record. So I'm not for that in any sense. I don't choose to live in Russia. I'm not a Putin supporter. But there's a war going on, and it's crushing the United States economy. And most Americans don't understand that. And I want to talk about that. And so I made that decision.
It's crushing the economy. It's not crushing the war economy, though. A lot of that money winds up coming back
small number
to
of
the uniparty, the corporations that do that.
I totally agree, but
they always find a way to win.
Kicking Russia out of SWIFT.
Listen to what he just said. He said the corporations, he said they always find a way to win. Right? So I believe the reason why he didn't ask him about Navalny is because I don't think that would have went well for him. Right? Because what if Vladimir Putin would have said, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was the CIA, right? So if Tucker Carlson thinks that the Biden administration, are trying to come for him now, think about how much harder they probably would have came for him, right? If that would have been aired. So we have to think about that. I think that's why he didn't ask him about that. But what was interesting about this entire discussion is that here are two, two dudes that come from pretty privileged backgrounds. And what I mean by that is Tucker Carlson comes from a wealthy family. Chris Cuomo comes from a political family. I mean, these people, you know, they've had a lot more than I did, especially growing up. But it's just interesting how, regardless of what happened with their work ethics, the way how they're just able to bounce back very quickly and to quickly just move on to another project. And what I wanted to say to you about that is the fact that this is what happens when you have money. When poor people and working class people, when they get fired from jobs, they don't bounce back just like that. These guys were able, Tucker Carlson was able to go create a whole entire other network. Chris Cuomo got hired at News Nation, started his own podcast on the side as well, bringing on really big name guests, you know, as if nothing ever happened. And this is not to say that you should keep pretending, you should be acknowledging every time that these things happened. But what it is to show you is that when you have money, it's a lot easier for you to bounce back from any type of pitfall than it is when you don't. I think it's either tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the Don Lemon situation. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. But like, they can just easily just bounce back like that. It was interesting. You can watch the full interview, part 1 and part 2, because there's 2 parts on Chris Cuomo's podcast and also on News Nation. They are long, I will tell you that.